Welcome to another edition of GEVA Live. I'm your host, John Titus, here with three officials from our GEVA region. I'm joined today by Timothy Countryman, Londa Marvini, and Daniel Sam. Thank you all for joining me again for this edition. So today's job is to dive into four areas of officiating and understanding between coaches, parents, and players. We want to dive into uniforms, jewelry, player equipment, and of course the dreaded sanctioning. How do we get those warnings, or how should we not get those warnings, yellow and red cards and exclusions, or expulsions, I should say. All right, so we'll start with the and get to the hard one later on. Let's start today with Londa. Londa, can you tell us a little about, in high school, what do I really have to make sure about my uniforms, what's going to be allowed and what's not going to be allowed?
Well, I would say if anything, uniforms are a little more relaxed than USAV. They basically say it has to be light colors, simply probably because a lot of times the sports in high school, they don't have as much funds available. So you might have new uniforms, as long as they're similar, they're acceptable. Top and bottom have to match for the uniform players. If they have a uniform bottom with a number, that has to match the uniform top. But as long as they're light color and close enough, it's acceptable. It doesn't matter sleeve length either. You can use one person can have a long sleeve, one person can have a short sleeve.
Daniel, same thing. Anything in high school we should know about? When I go to purchase uniforms, I want to get the coolest uniform there is. Is that okay, or I got to be careful in what I order?
You can be as cool as you want to be, John, but the uniform has to be compliant with the rules. So we follow NCAA rule. So the numbers have to be clearly distinguished. You have to be able to distinguish the numbers, right? We are not as flexible as Linda is. It's not like the uniform has to be the same thing as the same color uniform for the shirts, and this year also the same bottom. But this year, as you know, some of the rules change, and the bottom does not have to match. All the players doesn't have to have the same type of shorts. In Nassau, we do not disqualify a team because of uniform. So there is a modification that says you go to the opposite coach and you tell them if a team is out of uniform or out of compliance, whether or not they want to protest, but the game will take place. So if they said no protest, then there's no note, or you don't put anything on the score sheet. If they say they want to protest, you make a note of that on the score sheet, but the game goes on. So you never stop a game because of players being, the uniform is not compliant. But you expect the uniform to be compliant. You expect to be able to see the numbers. You expect the libero to have a contrast jersey, so make it easy for the referees to know who the libero is, and you expect the shorts to be compliant as well.
Fair enough. Good deal.
So the one thing though is for high school, there, at least in New Jersey, there is no protest. Nothing's protestable. So
understood. And then Londa, so I'll refer to this for you guys on the high school side. What does contrast for the libero jersey entail in the high school? As long as the official can tell, it's all good, or is there a little bit more to the rule than that?
I mean, speaking for New Jersey, it pretty much follows USA rules as far as has to be contrasting. So a dark green cannot be considered contrasting to a black, and even some blues. It is contingent on the official, but they do try to go across the board as far as taking consideration that someone that's colorblind, taking consideration maybe someone sweating, and eventually changing colors to a darker color. So we do try to be we enforce the libero jersey as much as the USA does.
That's good to know.
They don't have to be solid.
Yep, understood. So Tim, same thing on the USA club side. As far as uniforms go, what modifications, what should we be aware of when we're going out finding those new uniforms for the season? And again, the contrasting rule between the liberos, what should we be aware of?
Okay, first of all, we're a little more strict. Uniform means uniform. Everybody looks the same. Uniforms cost a lot of money, and that really is a cool thing to have the most coolest uniforms in the gym. And sometimes creativity gets in the way of legality of a uniform. Most importantly, numbers need to be the proper size and they need to be visible. And what I would advise anybody to do before they bought the really most coolest uniform would be to send me an artist mock-up or a photo of what someone is proposing, and I can go through it and make sure that it's going to comply. USA Volleyball, the rules interpreter, Bill Stanley, also started a service last year where you can send him an image of your uniforms and he can rule on their legality. Legality considers a lot of things, both with libero contrast, solid numbers where the numbers are placed, middle of the chest, middle of the back, not obscured. And as far as contrasting libero uniforms, it is an official's judgment, but the officials are given guidance in how they provide their judgment. Just because I can tell the difference between a light blue and a medium blue doesn't mean that the next person and the next referee can, or people in the stands, or more importantly, the opposing players. Londa hit on a lot of factors that can influence whether something's contrasting or not. Saturated uniforms, lighting in the gym is huge. Dark gym, that medium blue and light blue might not be visible, or in a light gym it would be visible. Dark gym, you may not be able to tell the difference.
Good to know. Good to know. Without a doubt. So, Tim, speaking of some of the things Daniel hit on in the high school side, if in club I want to buy a uniform that has one short sleeve and one long sleeve, is that okay currently according to USA standards?
That is okay according to USA standards. Sleeve length is not considered a factor in the style of the uniform, but a sleeve uniform is. In other words, a tank top and a short sleeve aren't the same thing, but a short sleeve and a long sleeve would be the same thing.
Good to know. Okay. And then as far as my I guess my shorts or my pants or leggings, do all of us have to wear leggings, or do all of us have to wear shorts, or as long as they're the same color, it's okay?
Shorts need to be similar in color and style. Interestingly, NCAA is modifying this year so that they had so many requests for religious exemptions of late, where people needed to keep their legs covered, that they have gone to a more liberal interpretation. Undergarments that are exposed by design. In other words, if someone was wearing baggy shorts and there were spandex underneath, the spandex underneath need to be the same color.
Understood. Good to know. Cool. Thank you for that interpretation. All right.
Actually, John, I misspoke on the one with high school. You do have to have a solid color for the libero, just so you know.
Okay, so it's got to be a solid color. It can't be some crazy sublimated uniform. It's got to be a full solid.
Right, it has to be a full solid color. Yes.
Good enough.
And we've given up on solid, but our rule says clearly contrasting from any angle, any view.
Understood. Yeah, I know one of the ones, and there's a great picture online in the interpretation where you see a lot of uniforms with the side white stripe. That player looks the same in whatever uniform they wear because everybody's got that same white stripe. Would be an incorrect uniform. So I encourage you guys to look at that from, again, like their official said here, from every angle it needs to be clearly defined. So good to know.
That's where the 50% rule also comes in, John.
Yep, absolutely. So the next item that we have on our list today is jewelry, and this is, I think, a very interesting one for a lot of people. And I think we have a couple different things here. Number one, this rule has drastically changed in recent seasons for a lot of our different rule interpretations. But I also think even though there is a rule here that the officials are going to tell you, you still have the safety of your players in mind as coaches. So if an official might say to you, the rule says you can wear something, but if you as a coach thinks it's still to the danger of your player to wear such items, please make sure they don't do so. All right, so that's my little piece on that before we get into this part. Daniel, do you want to speak a little bit about the high school rule as far as jewelry goes?
Yeah, jewelries are not allowed for high school. anytime that we see the jewelry, our job as R2, and when we monitor the warm-ups, we're always looking for little jewelries that might be hidden under the uniform and so forth, those little piercing that they have, and then we ask them to remove it. So a couple of thinking here about also sometimes they hide the jewelry under band-aids, especially earrings. If you suspect that it is a jewelry underneath that band-aid, then you escort the player to the coach and ask them whether or not there's a jewelry underneath. And if they say no, then you tell them that if that band-aid comes off, that automatic red card. So we do not allow jewelry, and we do monitor that during warm-up.
Good to know. I like that. So for all you coaches that want to play, the games with hiding jewelry under band-aids, you're risking a big red card right there if that Band-Aid falls off and Daniel sees it. He's giving you the heads up now. So, Londa, anything else as far as jewelry goes in the high school game?
As far as, like, for example, bobby pins, anything on it has to be unadorned if it's in their hair, and it can't be beyond 3 inches.
Good to know. And of course, I assume there's a medical exemption if somebody has a medical bracelet or necklace on. How does that work in the high school game?
Same thing with USA, it has to be taped underneath.
Okay. Good to know. Awesome.
Along with religious medallions.
Yes. That's
Perfect.
correct.
Awesome. Tim, any difference on the USA side now?
Sure. This is another place where we're a little kinder, a little more gentle, a little more understanding. I'm hoping people are watching instead of listening, because I'm going to use you guys as an example. John has a necklace on. We don't think that's going to cause an injury. Londa, you have earrings. They're small. They're not going to cause an injury. And you held up a watch a little while ago. You want to do that again? That's pretty big and clunky. I might want to get rid of that. We get into some medical issues. If that happened to be a monitor of some sort, medical devices are allowed as long as they're padded and won't cause injury. But that's the first thing we look at, even though we're kinder, gentler. I know you just got your ears pierced, but if they look like they're dangerous, then they have to go. Don't get your ears pierced during the season.
Yeah, I always tell my players, please don't pierce your ears. Please don't get your nails done. It's not the time to do so. And if you do get your nails done, they're gonna not be so nice in a day or two after practice. So that's your call if you want to do so. So good to know. Thank you. So the next one is player equipment. So I guess first off, I'm kind of going to go to Tim on this one. Tim, how would you define player equipment? What items are we talking about here?
They are things that are outside of the uniform, the jersey and the shorts. Player equipment would be shoes, gym shoes, pads, knee pads, other pads.
And then you're talking about like, or maybe an arm sleeve, or possibly like maybe even a cast, whether it be a soft or hard cast, and if that's allowed to be used and played with.
Oh, we don't like casts at all, whether they're padded or not. I know the other governing bodies do allow for padding.
Understood. So, Tim, I guess we'll start with the USA side on this one. So what do you want us to know about player equipment, little nuances in USA's rules that we should be aware of? And, and you also, kind of mentioned casts there, kind of, two parts of that.
Yeah, we pretty much have hit on player equipment. Cast is the big one. And the other thing I would point out is that knee pads, for example, socks, shoes don't have to match.
Good to know. So, Tim, in USA Volleyball, if myself and Daniel are playing on the same team, and I have a black, undergarment sleeve after my uniform, and he's wearing a white sleeve underneath his uniform, is that okay according to USA?
If they're sleeves, yes. If they are an undergarment, if they were, say, a long sleeve T-shirt under the jersey, and how we're going to find that out, I don't know. I'm hoping we're not looking too carefully. But if it appears to be a sleeve, they can be different. The sleeves would be considered player equipment, where the T-shirts underneath would be considered part of the uniform if more than one player was wearing them.
Good to know. And Alon, the same thing on the high school side, in regards to player equipment and things like that.
Yes, no hard casts are allowed. They can wear braces like on the knees. And in the past, they had to be covered with sleeves, but they just made a ruling a couple of years ago that they don't have to be, as long as they're used in the intended purpose that they were manufacturally made. One note also with the uniforms is, at least for high school, you can't wear uniforms with zippers.
Good to know too. Daniel, any other thing you want us to know about player equipment?
No, besides what Tim mentioned, yes, we do allow cast as long as it is padded, and all the other ones are common. The undergarment has to be the same if one player has them. The sleeve is not considered one, and not that much of difference between what Tim said and what we use in the high school.
Fair enough. Good to know. All right, and now for the big one. And this one, I know I never remember, because I never get in trouble, first of all, of course. And like, anyway, but how does a coach go from a warning to, or I even go, and I'll throw names out there. How do I go from a Mario finger wag all the way to a red card? So how does that go, and who do we want to start with? I'll go with Daniel. Can you kind of give us the progression in a high school match of, how do I go from a verbal warning all the way to the escalation process? And there's quite a few levels to this. 2 ends. Can I go from 0 to 60 right away, or do I have to stay with a certain progression?
All right, so I'm going to speak about 2 different things here. For the state of New York, you're allowed to give a verbal warning and a yellow and migrate that to a red if the misconduct is continuing. In Nassau, we do not use a yellow card, and I think that was changed a few years ago, way before I started doing high school in Long Island. We go directly to a red card. So if there is a situation where you think that you need a card, the yellow is not only, it's only used for delays, it's not used for individual sanction. So we go directly from a red, and then it escalates from there. So you got to be very careful, and some referees are very reluctant actually to use, because you go directly to a red, which is something I'm a little bit against, because sometimes your yellow actually makes your point as opposed to going to a red card. But the state allows you to do it. In Long Island, in Nassau, not Long Island, in Nassau, we go directly to a red card. So it depends again on the behavior. It depends also on your level of tolerance. Some people are like, okay, I'm in control of the match and I'm going to give a red card. And some people actually control the matches without giving red cards. It all depends on the referees. I'm not one to go to red card automatically. I kind of a little bit of the leeway. I know it's a emotional game. When I played, I was emotional. I jump up and down. So I'm not one to actually go and says, okay, you need to stay down. But if it is a repeated behavior, and then also when you work, you expect your R2 to control that a little bit, right? So if my R2 is controlling that, there's no reason for me to overrule that unless I'm asked for a card, right? So all of that is taken into consideration when I'm sanctioning a coach.
Good to know too. So Daniel, in high school, if the R2 feels like a coach is getting out of control, deserves a sanction, and I'm going to be careful how I give this question. Can an R2 technically give a head coach a card, or do they have to go to their R1 and talk to them for the R1 to give them a card?
It would be unusual for an R2 to have a card in the back pocket. They should leave that at home. An R2 usually requests a card to the R1, and the R1 sanction, either the player or the coach, right? So for high school, we follow again, like I said before, we follow NCAA rules. So we will call the captain over and explain what the card is about on sportsmanlike conduct or whatever the situation is. But the R2 will request the card from the R1. That's not issue a card himself or herself.
Awesome. Good. Londa, same idea. Any nuances as far as New Jersey or any other high school affiliations go?
Well, NFHS, both R1 and R2 do carry cards. What the R2 will do is show a card on their chest, but the R1 is the one that directly issues the card. As far as the yellow and red cards and disqualifications, it carries over throughout the match, so it's not reset after each set. There is, as far as the levels of, there's the warning, the red. There is no expulsion; it goes directly to DQ. And with the disqualification for a referee, it's held in separate hands. When a player is disqualified, if there's a parent or a supervisor that can remove them from the gym, they are removed. But if not, then they have to stay at the team bench until someone's there to be able to remove them.
Understood, because there's a responsibility to keep those kids safe that you can't kind of get around. Yep, understood. So, Londa, in the high school game, every time a red card is shown, is that a point or not necessarily?
That is a point, along with, unlike USA, a disqualification is also a point.
Understood. Cool. All right, Tim, same question. What is that progression in USA ball, going from a finger wag all the way up to expulsion if possible?
Alrighty. If anybody comes through my clinic and they only learn one thing, I want our officials to be managers, people. I want them to be facilitators. I don't want to see incidents boil up. I'm trying to produce managers more than cops and rules enforcers. That being said, there are personalities. Daniel, you mentioned that this is an emotional game, and that's really cool. Our sanctions are a little more strict. Well, I'll go back one. FIVB and USA started, you mentioned the finger wag. This isn't stop it, you're bad. This is your first warning. And that's meant to not show somebody up with a card. It's you've reached a limit that I don't want you to exceed. Let's just be colleagues here, and let's not let it get out of hand. When it does get out of hand, our sanction scale is yellow card warning. It's a formal warning. Once a warning's been issued to player A on a team or a coach, that applies to everybody on the team. The next player that misbehaves is sanctioned with a red card, which is a point. We have an expulsion, which is a step between red card and disqualification, where a player would be removed from the match and parked on the bench, or a coach would leave the playing area. Finally, disqualification would be something that was completely egregious, and that player or coach would be removed from the gym. We would like it to escalate, but if somebody starts out going 60 miles an hour in a 30, we card as though it was 60 miles and a 30. No yellow card for that. If somebody starts a fist fight, we don't give a yellow card warning for that. We cordially invite those participants to leave the gym. Trying to think of any other differences. You guys both officiate USA. Did I run up the scale, and did I miss anything along the way?
No, that's about it, I think.
I think those are perfect. So the only other one I've always been interested on as far as this goes, and we can refer this to both levels, if I am in a high school tournament situation where it's a full day tournament, and a club or USA full day tournament, or even a weekend tournament, does my sanction go over to the next match, the next day? Does it carry? So I guess I'll start with the high school side. Londa, do you, I'm not even sure if, this is a tough question. I'm not sure if anybody's been asked this before. On the high school side, a high school tournament, I get thrown out of my first match out of 3 matches for the day. Am I allowed to return, or does it matter what exactly happened?
Well, with NJSIAA, which is the governing body for New Jersey, to my knowledge, if you are disqualified, you are penalized from playing the next match, but that has nothing to do with us. Mm-hmm. That's all internal with the school AD and the governing body. So as far as like a disqualification, to my knowledge, yes, you are disqualified from playing in the next match. If, for example, is a try match, you would be disqualified from playing in the next match of that day.
Understood. Good enough. Daniel, any interpretation on that rule as far as Nassau or Long Island goes?
It is the same thing. When we issue a red card to a player, there's a form that we fill out to the governing body and then to the school also. So they are the one that discipline that player, and whether it be the judge that it should be restricted from playing the next game, and so that's not really upon us to prevent them from playing, but the report will need to go in to the sanctioning body as well as the school, and then they will take action on that. The same thing. Give a red card to a coach. Any red card that you issue, you need to fill out that form.
Mm-hmm. And Tim, same idea. Oh, go ahead, Londa.
I was going to say with New Jersey, if there's a disqualification due to a progressive, we don't have to fill out anything. It's only if it's a direct disqualification do we have to fill out paperwork.
Understood.
In New Jersey.
Gotcha. And Tim, same thing for USA. If it's day one of a qualifier and I misbehave poorly on day one, do I miss day two and day three, or not necessarily, or not at all?
Not necessarily. Our authority begins when we arrive at the court. It ends when the match is over. But there's a difference between authority and responsibility. If we observe behavior that would warrant action during a match, we have avenues such as reporting it to the head referee or to a site director, and the site director then can take action thereafter.
Good to know. All right. Thank you very much. So this has been another great edition of GEVA Live with our wonderful officials. Thank you, the three of you, for joining me, and I look forward to our next chat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent job, John. Thank you.